India's cultural roots. That which cannot be stolen, that which cannot be confiscated by rulers, that which is not a burden as it is, does not weigh anything, that which, though it is used, only grows every day. That is the greatest wealth of all, that is the wealth of true knowledge. This was the statement given by Subhashita. It is a wise saying. So he tried to actually define what true knowledge is. So in this chapter, we'll be covering these three main questions. That is, what are Vedas? What is their message? What new schools of thought emerged in India in the first millennium before Common Era? And what are their core principles? And what is the contribution of folk and tribal traditions to Indian culture? So, Indian culture, by any estimate, is several millenniums old. Like any ancient tree, it has many roots and many branches, and the roots nurture a common trunk. And from the trunk emerge many branches, which are the different manifestations of Indian culture, yet united by a common trunk. So, all our cultures have a common origin, but they had their own evolutions in different ways, and so we have various cultures, but they have the common origin. Some of these branches are about art, literature, science, medicine, religion, and the art of governance, martial arts, and so on. And there are also schools of thought, by which we mean groups of thinkers or spiritual seekers who share similar ideas about human life and the world. So our culture have many branches like martial arts, science, literature, and many more. And there are also groups of thinkers or spiritual seekers. So spiritual in this sense, it is concerned with the spirit or soul, and spirituality is the search for the deeper or higher dimensions beyond our current personality. It is related to God. And next is seeker, that is someone who seeks the truth of this world. This could be a sage, saint, yogi, or a philosopher. So many archaeologists and scholars have pointed out that some of India's cultural roots go all the way to the Indus or the Harappan or Sindhu Saraswati civilizations, as we have studied about them in chapter 6. So later on, over time, hundreds of schools of thought emerged in India. So we will see here a few early schools which have shaped India into a country with a unique personality. By understanding them and their roots, we can understand India, that is Bharat, better. So by understanding our culture, we can understand India much better. First is, what are the Vedas? So the word Veda actually comes from a Sanskrit word which means knowledge. So Sanskrit vid, which means knowledge. Hence Vidya, for instance. So it can be Vid or Vidya. So we briefly mentioned the Rig Veda in the earlier chapters, that is the first Veda. And in fact, there are 4 Vedas in total. So there are 4 Vedas, and the first oldest one is Rig Veda. So the rest are Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharva Veda. And they are the most ancient scriptures of India, and indeed among the most ancient in the world as well. Not just in India, but they are ancient in the world as well. And the Vedas consists of thousands of hymns, prayers in the form of poems and songs that were recited orally and not written. So those hymns were composed in Sapta Sindhava region, and it is difficult to say when exactly the Rig Veda, the most ancient of the 4, was composed. So we don't know at what time the Rig Veda was actually composed. Experts have proposed dates ranging from the 5th to the 2nd millennium before Common Era. So for anything between 100 or 200 generations, these have been committed to be of memory through rigorous training and passed on orally with hardly any alterations. So they were passed on orally, they were not in the written form. So This melodious transmission over thousands of years explains why, in 2008, UNESCO has recognized the Vedic chanting as the masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity. The Vedic hymns are composed by rishis, male sirs or sages, and rishikas, those are the female ones, and in any early form of the Sanskrit language. So they were mostly composed in Sanskrit language, and they were addressed in poetal form. They're mostly in poems, and they were in many gods and goddesses such as Indra, Agni, Varuna, Mitra, Saraswati, Ushas, and many more. So they refer to Indra, Agni, and many more. And together with the Shirs, these deities sustained rhythm or truth and order in human life and in the cosmos. Cosmos is the world or the universe as an ordered or an harmonious system. So in early, rishis and rishikas saw those gods and goddesses as one, not separate beings. As one famous hymn puts it, the existent is one and the sages give it many names. So the supreme God is only one and we gave him many names. In this worldview, values were especially important, beginning with truth, which was often given another name for God. So the last mantras of the Rig Veda also called for unity among the people. So the first foremost value is truth. It is also regarded to be the other name of God. So next, the last verse of Rig Veda will also speak about the unity among people. Come together, speak together. Common be your mind, may your thoughts agree. United by a purpose, united your heart. May your hearts be united, so all may agree. Next is the Vedic society. So early Vedic society was organized in different janas or clans, that is, larger groups of people. The Rig Veda alone lists about 30 such janas. For instance, the Bharatas, the Purus, Kurus, Yadus, and many more. So each clan was associated with a particular region of the northwest part of the subcontinent. It's important to remember that it is regarding the northwest part of the subcontinent. Not much is known of how these janas governed their society. The Vedas only give us a few clues through the words like Raja, that is a ruler or a king, Sabha and Samiti, both of which refer to the collective gatherings or assembly. So many professions are mentioned in the Vedic scriptures such as agriculturist, weaver, potter, builder, carpenter, healer, dancer, barber, and many more. Healer is someone who uses traditional practices to reveal or heal infections, mostly like a doctor himself. Next is the Vedic school of thought. Vedic culture also developed many rituals known as yajna, which were towards various gods and goddesses for individual or collective well-being and benefit. So yajna can be done by any individual for his own wishes, or it can also be done for the collective good of the people. So daily rituals were generally in the form of prayers and offerings to Agni, the deity associated with fire. So Agni is the deity which is associated with fire. But those rituals became more and more complex in the course of time. So in the initial times, yajna was more oftenly preferred by people, but at now the process has become more and more complex, so very less people are opting for that kind. And a group of scriptures known as Upanishads built upon the Vedic concepts and introduced new ones, such as rebirth, that is taking birth again and again, and the term karma, that is our actions or their results. According to one school of thought, generally known as Vedanta, everything, human life, nature, and universe, is one divine essence called Brahman, not to be confused with the God Brahma. So, God Brahma is different, and the one who controls the whole universe, the human life, and nature is known as Brahman, according to one of the Upanishads. So, the two well known mantras express this in a simple but profound way. That is Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman. That is, I am divine. The Upanishads also introduced the concept of Atman or self. So Upanishads have also introduced us with a concept known as Atma and the divine essence that resides in every being but is ultimately one with the Brahman. So it follows that everything in this world is connected and interdependent. So in every individual, we have an Atma which is linked to the Supreme, that is the Brahman. And it also states that everything in the world is connected and interdependent on each other. And this explains a common prayer that begins with Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina or may all creatures be happy and goes on to wish all to be free from sorrow. So early in the first millennium BCE, that is before Common Era, several more schools of thought grew out of the Vedas. One of them was yoga. So yoga was also from the Vedas, which developed methods intended to achieve the realization of Brahman in one's consciousness. So yoga is also performed for the realization. And together, these schools of thought became the foundations for what we call the Hinduism. So all these schools of thought, the Upanishads and all the Vedas all together have given rise to what we call Hinduism now. Next we'll study about Buddhism. So other schools of thought also emerged. First Hinduism and then other schools of thought have also emerged, which did not accept the authority of the Vedas and developed their own systems. So they did not approve the Vedas, so they have developed their own systems. So after 2.5 millenniums ago, a young prince named Siddhartha Gautama was born in Lubmini, which is now in Nepal. So depending on the sources they use, the scholars have come up with wildly different conclusions as regards to the precise birth year of his birth. So it is important to remember that a prince called Siddhartha Gautama was born in Lumbini. So in chapter 4, we chose it to be 560 BCE, that is before the birth of Jesus Christ, 560 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, to be as an approximate year. In any case, it makes no change in our story. So as the story goes, then Siddhartha Gautama grew up living in a protected life in the palace. So one day, at an age of 29, he asked to be driven through the city in a chariot. And for the first time in his life, he came across an old man, a sick man, and a dead body. And he also saw an ascetic who appeared to be happy and at peace. Following this experience, Siddhartha has thought of giving up his palace life, leaving behind his wife and son. So it is important to remember he was in a protected environment in the palace, and at the age of 29, he went on a chariot and he saw an old man, a sick man, and a dead body, and also a saint. So after seeing all these things, he just thought of leaving behind all his palace life, leaving behind his wife, and he started traveling on foot so that he could find some peace. So meeting other scholars, he searched for the root cause of suffering in human life. So when he saw the old man, sick man, and then the person who is no more, then he thought of actually understanding the root cause of the suffering in human life. So after meditating for many days under a peepal tree at a Bodh Gaya, which is now in Bihar, he attained enlightenment and he realized that avidya, that is ignorance, and attachment are the source of human sufferings, and conceived a method to remove these two causes. So he understood after his deep meditation that ignorance and attachment to the material things is what is the cause of all the sufferings. Siddhartha then became Buddha. So the Prince Siddhartha is then known to be as Buddha, which means the enlightened or the awakened one. So one who has got knowledge. And Buddha started to say people what he has realized, including the idea of ahimsa, that is non-violence, which is generally translated but originally means non-hurting or non-injuring. He also insisted on a sincere inner discipline, and the following sayings of his expresses this simply. Not by water is one made pure, though many people may bathe here in sacred rivers, but one is pure in whom truth and dharma reside. Conquering oneself is greater than conquering 1,000 men on a battlefield 1,000 times. So Buddha founded the Sangha, a community of bhikshus or monks or nuns, and who have sacrificed themselves to practicing and spreading his sayings. And his influence in India and indeed the whole of Asia was enormous, as we will study about it later. It is still perceptible even now. Next, we'll study about Jainism. So Jainism is another important school of thought that became widespread at the same time as that of Buddhism, although its roots are said to be much more ancient. Just like Siddhartha Gautama, a prince, Vardhamana was born in a royal family in the 6th century BCE, and his birthplace was near the city of Vaishali in modern day Bihar. So even like Siddhartha Gautama, the Jainism will start with the prince Vardhamana, who was also from a royal family. And at the age of 30, it is important to remember Siddhartha Gautama was at the age of 29, while here it is at the age of 30. He has thought of leaving his home and go in search of spiritual knowledge. And he practiced an aesthetic practice, and after 12 years, he achieved the infinite knowledge or supreme wisdom. So after 12 years, he has got his infinite knowledge, and he became as Mahavira. So the prince Vardhamana has become Mahavira or the great hero and started preaching what he has realized. So the word Jain or Jaina comes from Jina, which means conqueror. So that is how we got the word Jainism. So Jain preachings include ahimsa, anekantavada, and aparigraha. So these ideas share to a large extent with Buddhism and Vedanta school of thought. Next, these are the central idea of Indian culture. So the first may be illustrated by this saying, that is, all breathing, existing, living, sentient creatures should not be slain, nor treated with violence, nor abused, nor tormented, nor driven away. That is ahimsa. Now we'll understand the words. Anekantavada means not just one aspect or a perspective. That is, the truth has many aspects and cannot be fully understood by any single statement. So truth cannot just be one. It's based on different perspectives. Next is aparigraha, means non-possession, and advises not to be attached to material possessions. So it also is one of the causes which Buddha has realized, which are causing all the human sufferings. Jainism also insists on interconnectedness and interdependence of all the creatures, from humans to invisible organisms, as they support each other and cannot live without one another. We are all dependent on one another, either directly or indirectly. Scientists studying nature, flora, and fauna have again and again confirmed this deep truth. In both Buddhism and Jainism, monks and sometimes nuns too will travel across the world to spread the preachings of their leaders. Some of them created new monasteries in faraway places, while others led their lives in caves which are cut in the rock. Archaeological findings have revealed many traces of these monasteries and sometimes even the names of the monks who lived in that rock cut caves and slept on stone. So there were yet other schools of thought at the time. For example, one of these is known as Charvaka school, sometimes also Lokayata, believed that this material world is the only thing that exists and therefore there can be no life after we die. So this school will not seem to have gained much popularity and it has been not found with time. We mention it to show that there is a wide variety of intellectual and spiritual beliefs. So these both schools were actually not so prevalent among the people. But the thing they wanted to show by saying mentioning about this is that there was a wide diversity in knowledge. Although the Vedic, Buddhist, and Jain schools had important variations in them, they also shared some common concepts such as dharma, karma, rebirth, and search for an end to sufferings and ignorance, and many other important values. Even though they were different based on some of their ideas, but they shared some common concepts as well. And this is the trunk of the tree we started in this chapter. So all will have a common origin, but there will be many ways to approach the same thing. Folk and tribal roots. So the cultural roots we have seen so far are well documented in many scriptures. India has also had rich oral traditions, that is, they were transmitted through everyday practice without written ones. That is in the case of Vedas as well. So along them are numerous folk traditions that is transmitted by common people and the tribal traditions which are transmitted by tribes. So we'll study what is tribe. So there are many things we can understand for the social identity. Today, anthropologists usually consider a tribe to be a group of families or clans sharing a tradition of a common ancestry. So, a culture or a language living as a close knit community under a chief and holding no private property. That is, can be understood as a tribe. So, interestingly, ancient India has not used the word tribe. Tribes were just different janas that lived in a specific environment such as forests or mountains. So, tribes usually live in forests and mountains. And the Constitution of India uses the term tribes and tribal communities in English and Janjati in Hindi. So, according to the official figures in 2011, India had 705 tribes that are spread across most states, amounting to a population of about 104 million people, more than the population of Australia and that of the United Kingdom together. So, in the 19th century, anthropologists studying tribes often thought them to be as primitive or inferior to the civilized people. But with the deeper studies of tribal communities and their rich and complex cultures, such biased judgments have been abandoned. So they are no more primitive or inferior to the civilized people. They have their own culture. So there had been a constant interaction between the folk and tribal traditions and leading schools of thought such as those we mentioned in this chapter. So the deities, concepts, legends and rituals have been freely exchanged in both ways. For instance, according to the tradition, Jagannath, worshipped at Puri, Odisha, was originally a tribal deity. This is also the case with various forms of mother goddesses which are worshipped across India. So, some tribes, on the other hand, adopted Hindu deities long ago and they possess their own versions of Mahabharata and Ramayana as well. So, this has been well documented from India, northeastern states, all the way to Tamil Nadu. So there was an interaction between the common people and the tribal people, folk in the tribal traditions. So one such example we can find is a Jagannath, which we worship, all the people worship, but originally it was a tribal deity. How have such interactions taken place for so long and so naturally? It is, in the end, because folk, tribal, and Hindu belief systems have many similar concepts. For instance, in all three, the elements of nature, such as mountain, river, trees, plants, and animals, and some stones too, are regarded as sacred, and because there is a consciousness behind all of them. So, indeed, tribes generally worship many deities associated with the natural elements. So, how did the connection between the folk and the tribals happen? That is because of common concepts. So, even we think of plants, trees, and some stones to be sacred in the same way, tribes also start to worship the natural elements only. So, in that way, there was a common relation. For the Toda tribes of the Nilgiris of Tamil Nadu, for instance, one of them is pictured in the image on the right. Over the 30 peaks of this mountain range are residences of a god or goddess. So these peaks are so sacred that Todas avoid pointing to them with a finger as well. They think them to be as sacred. But even with this multiplicity of deities, as with the Hinduism and many tribal groups have a concept of higher divinity or supreme being. For example, several tribes of Arunachal Pradesh worship Dhoni Polo, a combined form of sun and the moon, who later rose to be the higher status of supreme god. This is also the case of the god Khandoba in the parts of central India. In eastern India, the Munda and Santal tribes, among others, worship Singhbonga, a supreme deity who created this whole world. There are many more examples. So, the Indian sociologist Andre summed up the situation in these words. The thousands of castes and tribes on Indian subcontinent have influenced each other in their religious beliefs and practices since the beginning of history and before. That the tribal religions have been influenced by Hinduism is widely accepted, but it is equally true that Hinduism, not only in its formative phase but throughout its evolution, has been influenced by tribal religions. So clearly, the result of this long interaction has been mutual enrichment. In this manner, folk and tribal beliefs and practices also count among India's cultural roots. We'll further study about this in the next chapter. So, in this chapter, what we've understood is that the Vedas, India's earliest, have given rise to the several schools of thought, Vedanta, Yoga, and they've also given an light race to the Buddhism and Jainism as well. And then we've studied about the tribal concepts and the interconnectedness between the folk and the tribal beliefs.